Welcome. This is Mathey Talks. I'm your host, Matt Frawley, and today I'm very excited to have Sohaib Sultan, who is the Muslim coordinator here at Princeton University. In fact, is that the right title, Muslim coordinator?
Yeah, my official title is Muslim Life Coordinator.
Muslim Life Coordinator.
And then, but on an unofficial basis, I'm known as the Muslim Chaplain. Imam.
Okay. So when we say, I was curious. When we say chaplain,
yeah,
and even as we were talking before we started filming, we say denominations. It's very Western tags we put on Muslim faith. I mean, so chaplain, is that okay? Or?
I mean, it's part of the Americanization
right.
of Islam, right? Where we're constantly adopting terms that are out there in the public sphere and that people already know, so that, you know, when you say imam, people don't really know what that is, but when you talk about a chaplain, people are like, yeah, I have some sense of what that might be. So chaplain is one term that we've adopted, and there's other terms that we've kind of adopted just to, you know, make it more functional in the public sphere.
Got it.
Yeah.
So before we get into what it means and to be the Muslim Life Coordinator on campus and your experience here, how did you tell us about your journey to Princeton?
My journey to Princeton, well, you know, I grew up in a very devout household in which my parents really inspired me to, you know, to serve God and serve the community. That was kind of the mantra of our home, you know.
And where was home?
And so I actually grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, and so I'm Midwestern and really still rooted in Midwestern values.
Okay.
So, you know, growing up, I really always had a sense of, you know, whatever I do in my life, I want to do it in the service of God and do it in the service of the community. Over time, I found that my talents, whatever limited they may be, lie hidden in working on the grassroots with people, and that this field of chaplaincy was very attractive to me because it allowed me to be engaged with people on an everyday basis, and at the same time it allowed me to really live out my faith in a very fulfilling way. And so, so I entered, after I went to Indiana University, I majored in political science and journalism, and worked as a freelance journalist for a few years, but then only after about 3 years I found myself back in school, this time doing chaplaincy as studies, graduate school in Islamic studies.
And that was at Harvard?
That was at Hartford Theological Seminary. Right. One of the only seminaries in the country that trains Muslim chaplains in America. And it has a historic Christian-Muslim relations program, which is fantastic. Yeah. It's a dialogical seminary, which I really enjoyed. And it set me up perfectly for university life, which is all about you know, fostering dialogue and interfaith relations.
Now, when you're there, to become an imam, I mean, my point of comparison is that I actually went to seminary as well, and I was part of the Presbyterian Church, and so you have the Presbyterian Church who's tracking your seminary degree, and you're going through their process for ordination. Is there a similar type of
so in the Muslim community, especially in America, we have no ordination. And so there are a few national bodies, for example, the Islamic Society of North America, that does endorse chaplains, but it does not require any particular course of study. It's their own kind of process that they have after somebody goes to them for endorsement. So I'm endorsed by the Islamic Society of North America. But most imams and chaplains out there are trained through some sort of seminary, through some sort of program, where they go and study with scholars independently. And even the idea of who is an imam, especially in the Sunni Muslim community, is something that happens quite organically. That when people start calling you an imam and recognizing you as an imam, you're an imam. Right. And so it's organic. It's a little bit messy, and it sets us up for a whole bunch of excitement, sometimes good and sometimes bad.
Now, so you graduate from Harvard Theological Seminary, and then were you working somewhere else before you came here to Princeton?
Yeah, so I was the first Muslim chaplain fellow at Yale. And then I served as a Muslim chaplain at Trinity College for 4 years in Hartford, Connecticut. And I served as a Muslim chaplain at Wesleyan University for 2 years. And this was all kind of happening semi-concurrently. Right. And then the Princeton job opened up, and it just fell in my lap. And I never thought I would leave Connecticut. I really liked Connecticut.
Right.
I moved around a lot in my life, so I thought that this would be a nice place to kind of settle down. But you know, when Princeton comes knocking, then you have to at least open the door and see what's there.
And people should know you're the first Muslim Life coordinator. So you come here and you have to create from scratch. So what was that like first couple of years? You
know, it was a lot of learning on the go. And the great thing about Princeton, and especially the Office of Religious Life, was that there was a free mandate to experiment and to see what works and to try out different things. And even now, 7 years into the position, I feel like we're still trying things out and experimenting because it's still a very new position. And even in America, there's not that many Muslim chaplains on university campuses. And so we're all kind of learning from each other at the same time. And this is all happening, you know, in this generation. And so we don't have any predecessors to look back to. And so we're kind of all creating it on the go. And so it's been very exciting. It's been very challenging. But
when you say challenging, I want to pick that up. What have been some of the greatest challenges that you've faced?
You know, I think some of the greatest challenges are trying to figure out what does it mean, you know, to be a Muslim chaplain at a prestigious university, you know, on a secular campus, right? You know, what is my role ultimately? Now, what's interesting is that a lot of what I've figured out my role to be is, you know, almost like program manager. And you even see in my official title, the, you know, coordinator of Muslim Life.
Right.
And so there's all sorts of events and programs that every day I'm kind of scratching my head over trying to figure out how to organize all these events. But what I really found a calling in and what I really enjoyed the most, you know, beyond the lecture series and the classes and all those things that we put together, is just a one-on-one, you know, meeting up with students, being there as a mentor, being there as a counselor, being there as a spiritual advisor. Those are the moments that I really enjoy, whether I do it as a community or with individual students. And trying to figure out how to do that more is, I think, challenging because students are always on the go. Students have limited time, but at the same time, they're eager. They need, you know, they need this type of mentoring. But trying to figure out how to merge all my different roles together. People often ask me, so what do you do at Princeton? And it's a hard question to answer because in one day I feel like I'm wearing 5 different hats. You know, in one moment I'll be meeting with an administrator about some university policy. The next hour I'll be meeting with a student who's struggling through some life issue. The next moment maybe I'm teaching a class. You know, the fourth moment, you know, maybe I'm, you know, helping some graduate couples through some marital issues. You know, so it's constantly, you know, a different thing that's happening in the world.
So I'm sure when students come to you, there might be some common struggles they have in just being Muslim here at Princeton University. So for those who aren't, what are some of the common struggles of Muslim students?
Well, I think that, you know, just about every minority group, you know, on a college campus, and this is certainly true of Muslims as well. One of the struggles they face is just trying to figure out, you know, how to maintain one's own sense of individuality and one's own sense of identity. And at the same time, you know, just integrate into the larger culture of the campus, you know. And so, you know, it may be no secret, for example, that Muslims religiously try their best to stay away from things like drinking, you know, hard partying, you know, things like that, which are kind of part of the dominant culture on Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, maybe. But at the same time, if you're not part of that scene, and you're not, you know, you're not making those networks and you're not establishing those contacts, then how are you fully integrated into the culture of the campus? And so, figuring out how to, you know, just go to where everything is happening, you know, or that's what people are told, you know. But at the same time, maintaining one's own moral integrity and identity is something that a lot of students, I think, struggle with.
Is there, so that's the individual struggle, trying to somehow, as you said, integrate into the general populace here at the university. Is there certain forms of, not overt, but prejudices that the students face here on campus? Or, let me put it this way: if there was one message you could get out to students to say, hey, here's a really great way to respect Muslim students. I don't know if you've ever thought of that, or is there something that they generally face?
So, I would say that for the most part, the Muslim students I speak to feel very comfortable on this campus.
That's great.
And they've made a lot of friends inside and outside of the Muslim community. And it's a great place to be Muslim. It's one of the few places that has a whole, like a robust, vibrant Muslim community on the college campus. But at the same time, we're living through a wave of anti-Muslim sentiment in the country. And every time you turn on the news, what you hear about is ISIS, and you hear about terrorism, and you hear about extremism. And when Muslim students, they also go to the newspapers and they turn on the television, when their faith is constantly put under that light, it can sometimes be really difficult. Because sometimes even the most well-meaning people, when they want to have a conversation with a Muslim, they'll start off with those type of things that are highlighted in the media.
Right.
So what do you think about ISIS? Or what do you think about, this or that, or what's happening in Pakistan to religious minorities? And for the most part, students are like every other student on this campus, struggling with these issues, grappling with these issues. They're not here to be spokesmen and women for their faith, and they for sure don't have clear answers to very, very complex and difficult questions. And I think that, in terms of what I would say, the best way to respect a Muslim student or a Muslim classmate or a fellow Muslim on campus is to simply become friends with them and to ask them questions not about ISIS and extremism. If you want to ask about that, you can get to it eventually, but first ask them about the baseball game.
Right.
Ask them about the football game. Ask them about their classes. Ask them about everyday normal things, which are the things that kind of we have in common. And then once you have established some sort of relationship, then you can struggle together with some of those more complex questions.
That's a good point.
And so I think that just puts people at ease.
Right. So can I transition a little bit? I was curious about, as the Muslim Life Coordinator, it's easy for us to say, oh, Muslim is one thing, but obviously Christianity has so many different denominations. Obviously you're, in a way, juggling Sunnis and Shias, and I wasn't sure if both schools of thought, or is that right, are represented on campus or balanced. I know Sunnis are a much larger majority, or the majority of Muslims. So I'm wondering how to balance that.
Yeah, it's a very good question. That's part of the challenge, of setting up chaplaincy on a college campus, is trying to figure out how to maintain our unity in the midst of diversity, and how to have this culture of togetherness without insisting on uniformity, right? So this is part of the challenges of what we're trying to figure out. Pluralism is not an easy thing, but it's a noble goal, and that's what we're trying for. So on this college campus, we have a lot of Shias, we have a lot of Sunnis, and we try our best to do all of our programs and events in a way that respects the sensibilities of both Sunnis and Shias. And also, we have tried our very best to stay away from sectarian type of issues. We want to talk. We want people to talk across schools of thought, but we don't want there to be polemics, on this campus.
Right.
And so we've tried our best to avoid that. Now, the interesting thing is that it's not just Sunnis and Shias. What's interesting is that within Sunni Islam, there's so much diversity, and then within Shia Islam, there's so much diversity. And then every individual kind of has their own personality and their own interpretation of religion. And so you have a real, hodgepodge, and you have a real diversity. And grappling with all of that as the Muslim chaplain is sometimes, difficult, but it's a challenge and welcome.
So one thing I have to admit, I did a little research on you, and 2004, you published the Quran. You were part of the Dummies. You are the author of the Quran for Dummies.
I am the author of the Quran for Dummies. That's true.
That is awesome. So I just wanted people to know that. So if you go into Barnes and Nobles or go online and see Quran for Dummies.
Yeah.
You know, anyway, I just want to get that out there. I'm going to go somewhere else. November 9th in Mathey College, we are hosting, and you were coaching me on how to say this, Quali.
Yeah, you got
close?
it. Pretty close. Pretty close.
It's a Sufi.
Sufi South Asian devotional
music.
Musical performance.
Right. So we'll have a performance and discussion.
Yeah.
Afterwards. Now, what's the group, and talk a little bit about the event.
Yeah. So Qawwali is this classical form of Sufi devotional music that comes out of South Asia. It's very prominent in India and Pakistan. And the group that's coming is actually a group of young Muslims from Pakistan, India, and Afghanistan who grew up in Texas, and they're based out of Texas. But they went to the homeland of their parents, and they learned the Qawwali tradition. And now they're coming back to the country and doing tours throughout the country. So we're really excited to host them at Princeton. And one of the reasons I'm really excited to host them is because, Qawwali is part of this incredible legacy in Islam of mysticism and of exuberant celebration of the divine and of the sages and of the prophets and the saints, of the Islamic tradition. And Qawwali really is one of those things that, even though it's in a language that one may not understand, just by being in its presence, you feel this real excitement. You can just kind of tell how moving it is. And the cool thing about this group is, because they're an American group, they'll also be offering commentary and explanation, so people will be able to follow along.
That's right.
The whole
yeah. The Qawwali tradition, still struggling with it, is, I know it's Sufi. Yeah, is Sufism, is it have more of a home? I don't know. This is showing my ignorance in the Shia tradition, or it's accepted in both, or again, I don't. This is my ignorance.
Sufism is a very interesting school of thought within Islam. It's pretty much founded within Sunni Islam.
Okay.
But one of the interesting things about Sufism is that it really is, if you look at it very closely, it's one of those things that bridges the Sunni and the Shia community.
Interesting.
And so it's almost that glue that brings the community together. And so, for example, in the Shia tradition, there's a lot of celebration of Ali, Hassan, Hussein, and the family of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Now, I asked. That's interesting, because I know with the Shia tradition, this is what little I can remember of my teachings and my learning of the Muslim tradition is the Shias, they look to Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, Ali. They look to him as the kind of the successor, and so they look at that line of whereas the Sunnis, it's elected leader, right?
Exactly.
So that's why I wondered if the Sufi, but that's interesting how it got its home.
So I mean, it's interesting because the figure of Ali and his sons and Hassan and Hussein and the whole family of the Prophet Muhammad surely is celebrated and revered in both Sunnism and Shiism. But certainly because of the way that succession happened after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad, there is this notion that it's the Shias who basically, aligned themselves with the family of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Whereas the Sunnis feel that the mandate to lead and the mandate of who succeeds the Prophet Muhammad is open to the wider community and not just to his family, right? And what you'll find about the Sufis is that a lot of their songs, and you'll see this in the Qawwali performance, are even though they're based out of mostly the Sunni tradition, although not exclusively, a lot of it is songs of praise of Ali and of Hassan and of Hussein and of the family of the Prophet. Ahmed, peace be upon him. And so that's one example of where the Sufis have really been that bridge between the Sunnis and the Shia in many ways.
That's great. Well, I'm excited. It's going to be a really neat event.
Yeah.
And we're drawing to a close. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to come here today.
Thank you so much.
And I want to take this time. You're one of the kindest and gentlest. And I've just had the pleasure of knowing you for these last couple of years. So I really appreciate your friendship and coming here today.
Thank you. Thank you so
thanks
much.
So much.
Matt. Thank you.
Okay.